12, verses 9 through 21, Romans. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection and outdo one another, showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another and do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought of what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, "Vengeance is mine, and I will repay," says the Lord. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. They're thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. John?
Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affected one to another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer, distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. Bless them that persecute you, bless and curse not. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place into wrath. For it is written, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good.
Don't just pretend that you love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Stand on the side of the good. Love each other with brotherly affection and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy in your work, but serve the Lord enthusiastically. Be glad for all God is planning for you. Be patient in trouble and prayerful always. When God's children are in need, you be the one to help them out. And get into the habit of inviting guests home for dinner, or if they need lodging for the night. If someone mistreats you because you are a Christian, don't curse him. Pray that God will bless him. When others are happy, be happy with them. If they are sad, share their sorrow. Work happily together. Don't try to act big. Don't try to get into good graces of important people, but enjoy the company of ordinary folks. And don't think you know it all. Never pay back evil for evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honest clear through. Don't quarrel with anyone. Be at peace with everyone, just as much as possible. Dear friends, never avenge yourselves. Leave that to God, for he has said that he will repay those who deserve it. Don't take the law into your own hands. Instead, feed your enemy if he is hungry. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink, and you will be heaping coals of fire on his head. In other words, he will feel ashamed of himself for what he has done to you. Don't let evil get the upper hand, but conquer evil by doing good.
Thank you. That's a lot of words. But I hope that you heard in those three versions what it is to be a Christian. In my Bible, this section is titled Marks of a True Christian. This is Paul taking the teachings of Jesus and his understanding of the Christian faith and distilling it down to a list of actions. He's saying, if you want to be seen as a Christian, if you want to be a Christian, this is how you will live. And we remember that Alexander Mack himself said, how will the brethren be recognized but by the manner of their living? And so throughout this passage, what we have here is really a list of actions and a treatise on integrity. On integrity. I like the version that Dee read when it begins. It says, you know, with regard to love, where it says, let love be genuine, it says, don't just pretend. This isn't about just putting on. You know, I remember growing up and putting on my Sunday best. You know, you'd put on, you'd dress up, and I remember at Easter putting on little gloves and a little hat and all of that. You would dress up to go to church. And that's because it was important, it was special, that's fine. But being a Christian, it's not about the window dressing. It's not about just acting the part. When I went to college in North Carolina. How many here have lived in the South ever for any period of time? Anyone? There's a few. Sandy, I see you. And let's see, keep your hands up because I have to toggle between screens. Anyone else? Steve, Carol, okay. Yeah, good. Okay, Torrin. Okay, so I lived in North Carolina, and what I came to understand when I got there was, you know, that of course people have some different phrases and some different idioms they use, some different sayings. And the one thing you did not want to hear coming out of someone's mouth was, why, bless your little heart. You really didn't want to hear that. You would think, you know, that that's a good thing, you know, someone's blessing your little heart, but no. It was it was dripping with sarcasm, and if you heard someone say, well, bless your little heart, it meant they could not disagree with you more, and you were the biggest fool on the face of the earth, and they were doing all they could do not to be so vexed with you that they would blow up. Bless your little heart. So this passage in Paul is saying, don't be about that. Don't be about that. Don't be about, you know, putting on, you know. And this means, you know, too, that while we are to be joyful in our faith and we are to spread that to others, that it has to go down deep. It has to come out of that well that is within us. It's not just a gloss. We're not just putting it on. You know, this is about living our faith from the inside out. Another way of living, which is what we say we want to be about, right? We say we want to be about that. We want to live our faith. And really, our vision statement says that, right? I love that we are saying that every week, and I love that is getting inside of us. I hope that's getting inside of us. And this is not about what we believe. It's about how we're going to live. It's about that we are actively building a radical spirit-filled community, which means we have to be listening to the Spirit, right? We have to be listening to what God's Spirit is telling us. Cultivating authentic relationships. That word authentic, I would love to hear from you during the sharing time about that word authentic. I have never seen in a vision statement for a church that we are going to be about cultivating authentic relationships. I've never seen that before. I think that that's fascinating. I think that that's fabulous. I don't know how you came up with that, but I will tell you that that's what Paul's talking about here when he's saying to let love be genuine. He's saying cultivate authentic relationships, real relationships, not ones that are just nice. The church gets very hung up on being nice. And oftentimes in being nice, we forget about honest. Now, honest and nice don't have to conflict with each other, but sometimes they do. And if they do, we need to weigh in on the honest. No, it's not about just the nice. It's about let love be genuine, authentic relationships. I just love that. And that we're doing this to share God's inclusive love in and beyond our city. And again, this love that is God's love, that God's inclusive love, means that it calls us to love beyond our prejudices, beyond our comfort zone, that we're going to be about God's love. And again, letting love be genuine. I really appreciate these words because they're concrete, and I'm a concrete person. I'm all about dreaming, but as soon as someone puts a dream out there, I'm going to say, and you may have experienced this with me, I'm going to say, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to be about that? How are we going to make that manifest? I'm about executing, making it happen. I think that's important. And what drew me to the brethren actually was this, with regard particularly to pacifism. So when I was growing up, it was in the Vietnam War era. I just turned 60, and I remember watching the war on TV. I remember the death counts. How many of you remember that? Yeah, a bunch of you. You remember that, seeing that, right? And I remember there was one year at Christmas time when there was a ceasefire, and the Viet Cong and our soldiers were playing. They were playing like chess together on Christmas Eve, and it was on TV. And I said to my dad, I must have been really little, 5 or 6. I said to him, Daddy, so they're playing chess together. Are they going to go kill each other tomorrow? And he said, well, I expect so. And I will tell you, my little mind could not understand that. And for my whole life, I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand how you can play a game with somebody one night and be about Christmas and go kill each other the next day. Okay, that made no sense to me. And so when I met the brethren, and I realized that there were Christians who were pacifists and churches that didn't have a flag in the front, because I'd always grown up going to churches, Presbyterian and Baptist churches that had flags in the front. I was just shocked. And that these people had this statement that all war is sin, and that they'd had this since the 1700s, and that they meant it. It was amazing to me. I was like, these people aren't just saying things. They are living what Jesus said, which is blessed are the peacemakers. What Jesus said is those who live by the sword die by the sword. And I so appreciated the brethren that I came to be part of you, and it was really that did it. That this wasn't a belief, that this wasn't words, but this was behavior. And it was behavior springing from sincerity and integrity, from deep within. There was this understanding that love wins. Also, I appreciated the freedom of conscience, because as I came to know the brethren, I came to understand that, you know, there were people who served in the military, and they were allowed their freedom of conscience to do so, but that the church still held that violence is not our way, that it is sin, it is missing the mark. And this gets lifted up in this passage, right? This gets lifted up where Paul is saying to us, you know, how are you to treat your enemies? You're to feed them. You're to give them something to drink. You're to take care of them because they are people. There is this understanding in this passage that what matters most is that we're all human beings. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. It doesn't matter even if others treat you badly. Do not repay evil for evil. Someone is unjust toward you. You do not have to be unjust, unjust in turn. You do not have to do that. In fact, what Paul says here is, look, God's going to sort it out in the end. It's not about you. And, you know, this week in the news, we heard about the things that have happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And one of the most dreadful things is that there was a young man, 17 years old, a young white man who just a kid, who decided to take the law into his own hands, come into that town, and he shot 2 people dead. Now, this passage, as Dee read it, it says, don't take the law into your own hands. As John read it and I read it, it says, no, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. This is not our place. And we're not to be about killing. We're not about violence. We're not to be about that. We are to live the teachings of Jesus. Jim Wallace said, we have to be more than lovers of peace. We have to be makers of peace. And so in making peace, what do? It's about how we live, how we engage one another. And it is about creating a just and equitable society. It isn't just the cessation of violence. It isn't just everything staying calm. No. It's about more than that. And if we would follow these rules here for how we behave, how would the world be different? If just all of us as Christians would let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another, everyone with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor, rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, which these other translations talked about travail and trouble. Be patient in that and persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints, that is, care for one another in the fellowship, and extend hospitality to the stranger. Hospitality, radical welcome to those who are different, to those we don't understand, to those who are not of our immediate community. Bless those who persecute you, bless them. Rejoice with those who are rejoicing and weep with those who are weeping. And so we have these rules, we have these behaviors, we have this way of living our life. And the question is, how do we do that today? How do we do that in our world today? And, you know, unfortunately, there are many who would say, well, we live this the way we've always lived this. And don't be bringing the stuff of the world now into the pulpit. Don't be doing that, because that's talking politics. And we have this separation of church and state, which means we don't let that come in. This is such an unfortunate thing. It is so unfortunate that we, as Christians, so many times divorce ourselves from the culture. Richard Niebuhr, back before I was born, wrote a book called Christ and Culture. And he talked about how the church is often divorced from the culture, right? It is Christ against the culture. And he said, we don't need to look at it that way. He said, we can look at Christ in the culture. We can look at the movement of the Holy Spirit in our world. We do not live separate from what is going on in the world around us. We do not live separately from our neighbors. And so if we are going to live as Christians, we must do it in this world. And we must do it taking into account what is happening around us. And we must allow the witness that comes to us through the Spirit to flow out into the world as it is. And so we need to think about, how is it that we live like this each and every day in this world here and now? I don't think I've been around you long enough to tell you all my stories. I don't know if I have. This one I'll probably remind you of this again come November, since it is an election year. But I remember the first time I voted, and I was a BVSer, and I was serving down in Bloomington, Indiana, and I lived in the housing projects. And the housing projects there are, it's commonly known as Pigeon Hill. And it's known as Pigeon Hill because the houses up on the hill were all, at first at least, small shacks before they built the housing projects. And it was literally across the tracks from the university. And when I lived there, it was the first time I was going to vote, and this was in the Reagan era. And my dad called me on the phone and he said, well, how are you going to vote? He said, are you going to vote for Reagan? Because you need to think about, are you better off today? Because that was the big thing that the Reagan folks are saying is, are you better off today? And I said, well, Daddy, I can't really just focus on, am I better off today? And he said, well, why not? He says, because you are. And I said, because I'm working with these people in this community center, many of whom who are illiterate, many of whom don't have indoor plumbing, many of whom are the poorest of the poor. And I said, and when I go to that voting booth, take them with me. He said, what do you mean you're going to take them with you? I said, well, I'm not literally taking them with me, Daddy. But I said, because they're not voting. He said, well, why aren't they voting? I said, I explained, they're illiterate, Dad, and they're older, and they're disenfranchised, and they're poor. And I said, but I have to take them with me, and I have to vote on their behalf. And he said, well, that's not how democracy works. He said, everybody votes for themselves. And I said, no, Daddy, you raised me to be a Christian. I got to take them with me. They're my people. I have to vote thinking of them, right? So we live these principles of love and perseverance and prayer and engagement with the world, in the world as it is. And this week, it was the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. How many of you here remember the first March on Washington? Anyone? Anyone remember that? Yep, we got some, right? Okay. So here we are 57 years later, and I'm 60, and I'm thinking, wow, this is my whole life. This has been going on my whole life. And people are still taking to the streets this week for the same reason. This was when Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech. And there was someone this week who was commenting on this and said, what we remember of the I Have a Dream speech is the I have a dream part. And this person said, I think we remember that because it's still a dream. It's not a reality. It's still a dream. And we're happy to consign it to being a dream, because we would have to work too hard for it to be a reality. And there was someone who was there at that initial gathering 57 years ago as a youth who was interviewed, and he said, well, yeah, what I took away from that speech, he said, wasn't the I have a dream part. He said, but it was the part where Martin Luther King Jr. starts off by saying, starts off by talking about these truths we have that are self-evident, that all men are created equal. And he said he was there to claim that equality for all of us. In reality, for all of us. It's not a belief, it's not an idea, but it needed to be enacted for all of us. Liberty and justice for all. He said that was why we gathered. We gathered there to say, this is a bill that needs to be paid. All are created equal, and all have the same rights, and all should be treated with justice and equity. And unfortunately, here we are 57 years later, and the Black Lives Matter movement, it's bringing this to the fore again, because inequality and injustice is still present in our society. It just is made manifest in different ways now than it was in the past. My whole life, many of our lives. What would it mean if we let love be genuine, if we persevered in prayer, if we worked at truly living our faith and advocating for the least of these that are in our midst? Again, this week in Kenosha, there was violence, and I don't know how many of you saw Jacob Blake's sister speak. You can see it online. He is the man who was shot 7 times in the back. He is now paralyzed. And I kind of don't care personally why he was shot. But 7 times in the back. I mean, as people who see violence as sin, this is a problem. This isn't right. There's not liberty and justice for all. And when his sister spoke out, Letitra Weidman, she said these words, I am my brother's keeper. And when you say Jacob Blake, make sure you say father. Make sure you say cousin. Make sure you say son. Make sure you say uncle, but most importantly, human. This is about human life, and his life matters. She went on to say that plenty of people have said to her that they are sorry this happened. And she said, I don't want your pity. I want change. I want change. And should we not all want that? Are we not to be, in a very real way, the followers of Jesus, the Prince of Peace? Are we not to call out violence? Are we not to call out injustice? Are we not to let love be genuine and flow through us into this world and advocate for all? This is the call we have been given. This is the way we are to live our lives. Amen. Amen.